I'm thrilled to be here today talking about ending energy poverty. It's an issue that many groups have been working on for a number of years, and we were beyond thrilled when the President signed the Electrify Africa Act into law recently, with the ambitious goal of increasing energy access by 50 million people in sub-Saharan Africa over the next couple of years. I'd like to particularly thank Congressman Yoho for his leadership on this, for Chairman Royce and Chairman Corker, who really did amazing work in pulling together this bipartisan legislation. I think I'll do some quick introductions and then turn it over to our panelists to make brief remarks and just facilitate a discussion on these issues. Congressman Yoho represents Florida's 3rd Congressional District. He was first elected in November of 2012. His tenure in Congress has focused on limited government, fiscal conservative, and free enterprise. Prior to being elected to Congress, he was a large animal vet and a small business owner who ran several veterinary practices. Mel Coleman is president of NRECA's board of directors and the CEO of the North Arkansas East Electric Co-op. And he's been a longtime board member of NRECA, I believe, right, since 2001, 2004. And I would like to give a special thanks to the rural co-ops for their advocacy efforts on Electrify. They have been really wonderful partners in this, and I think everyone will be very excited to hear about the international work that the co-ops are doing. It doesn't always seem like a natural fit until you hear their story, and it's impressive, and so we think that. And last but not least, Jacqueline Quinones from the One campaign. Jackie is the Director of Government Affairs for North America and Canada at One. Prior to joining One, she was a senior policy advisor focusing on sub-Saharan Africa for the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and was actually one of the staffers working on Electrify before joining One. She has also had stints at both the State Department and the Scowcroft Group as well, so we thank her. Congressman, would you like to say a few words about your support for Electrify and,
Be glad to, and I appreciate you having me here, and I appreciate you guys being here in the audience. This is an important subject, obviously, or you wouldn't be here. And, I come from kind of the right side of the aisle. I've been told I'm as far right as you can get. And, when we talk about foreign aid, we have a lot of people in my district that don't want to have foreign aid, and I'm one of those. But when you get into Congress and you see what's going on in the world, and you look at things like Africa, I sit on foreign affairs and agriculture, and I had the chance to go to Ethiopia, Tanzania, and the Congo. We went to the continent of Africa. There's 1.11 billion people on that continent. 650 million people don't have electricity. So when it came time for Electrify Africa, I was getting pushback from the right side, from people in Congress, from people in my constituency. And when we talked to them about what this really does, not only is it a way to help wean off of, it was a paradigm shift of how we give foreign aid out. And it goes more into developing economic base, electrifying different regions of the world to where they become more sustainable. And by doing that, you go from aid to trade, and it just improves the quality of life for people in so many different places. And it's like the video showed, try living without electricity. And I think we go back to the Stone Age, before fire, or before energy. And, this is just something, number one, it's a humanitarian effort. It's the right thing to do, and it's a way to bring the living standards up around the world. So thank you for allowing me to be here, and look forward to questions.
And Mel, maybe you could say a few words about the co-ops and history on the issue and why you got involved.
Thanks, Jen. Also, thanks to One and Global Oval and this wonderful Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which is a great venue for this. It's really about telling the story of the electric cooperatives in the United States and what we do on the international front. If you lived in rural America 80 years ago, you didn't have power. And that's what's happening in these countries that we work in every day. And the electrification that we went through 80 years ago, and the reason we went through them, a farmer had to milk his cow by hand. The ladies of the house had to carry wood, they had to use washboards, they had to use sad irons. Medical facilities, very few. Economic development, there was none. This is what we had in this country 80 years ago in rural America. The 75th Congress passed the Rural Electrification Act. Franklin D. Roosevelt was instrumental behind, obviously, the signing of that act, but he had a Hyde Park apartment, and he had a place in rural Georgia. And he realized that there was definitely a difference in New York and Georgia in terms of electrification. But that's what we see today in the foreign countries. So we're actually seeing the results of what we do with partnerships with others in our foreign countries shaping up the way it did in this country 80 years ago. We alleviate poverty. We bring in economic development. We make it so much easier on those who live there. And as we say in our co-ops all across this country, and there are 900 of us that serve 42 million Americans, 75% of the land mass, we're not in the electric business. We're in the life improvement business. And that's what we're doing in the countries that we're in. And currently we're in 43 countries. We have 200 co-ops that have been formed in these countries, and that's serving 140 million people.
Thank you. Jackie, maybe you could talk a little bit about one's history on this issue, why it got involved, and if I can ask you to give some of the really impressive stats. Maybe the congressman knows of all the letters and calls and really amazing advocacy work done by one volunteers all around the country. We're pretty good at bugging members when we have to. And Electrify was actually a pretty amazing effort by one campaign members all across the country.
Yeah, I like to say we try to be politely annoying. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having us on this panel, and thank you, Congressman Yoho, for being here with us. Yeah, I will talk just very briefly about some of the reasons why one got engaged on this issue. I'd say there are three big reasons, and they all fall underneath the theme, what I would call of doing better aid, not more aid. So the first reason was we came across this issue a little over 3 years ago and felt like it was this fundamental issue to so many things that we care about: economic growth, agriculture, health, education, and no one was really talking about it in the development space. And so we thought we should make this more of a mainstream part of the discussion as people think about what good development is and what is involved. So that was number one. Number two was that it relies on a partnership, a real partnership with the private sector and with experts like the rural co-ops, which we know is the future to sustainability in development. The future to all of this, to the end of aid, is economic growth, and it's companies being able to do their thing and create jobs and bring people out of poverty. So that was number two. And number three was that it unlocks potential. It doesn't just give someone something for a day. It doesn't give them a good or a service that might run out. It helps them to fill their potential and become their fullest selves. You know, right now, if you don't have electricity, it's hard to have a business. It's hard to provide for your children to make sure that they're nourished, can go to school. When you're able to provide something as basic as reliable electricity, suddenly people are able to engage their entrepreneurship skills, which if you've ever been to the continent of Africa, these people have so much energy and so many ideas, and they're so willing to work and try new things. But without some of that basic, framework, it's hard for them to make that happen. So we found that energy was really one of these things, and so those three reasons are really why we got involved on this. And a couple of our stats. Over the course of the campaign, which was a little over 3 years of working with members of Congress, like Congressman Yoho, we sent 200,000 individual messages to members of Congress. We had 1,400 constituent meetings with members of Congress around the country and in Washington, D.C., and we had 360,000 petition signers signing a petition saying that this was an important issue and we wanted to see this bill become law. So finally this year, in February, it went to the president's desk and became a law. So see what we can do in the next couple of years.
Thank you, Jackie. Congress, maybe you could talk a little bit about how we can effectively communicate to conservative Republicans, and in an atmosphere where it seems like members are pulling in, I don't want to use the word isolationist, but this sort of tendency to look within our own country and do less abroad. How one, the co-ops, other advocates in the room can help communicate better to your colleagues about the future of assistance and how it is in the U.S. national interest.
Be glad to, and I appreciate what you brought up about the awareness and reaching out to members of Congress, because it's awareness and education. And again, where I stand, it's not a popular thing. And when I told people I was supporting this, people in the House are like, what are you doing this for? You ought to be going the other way. And I said, no, this is a smart thing to do, especially when you have OPIC, Overseas Private Investment Corporation, if you're not familiar with that, and MCC, the Millennial Challenge Corporation. When you see those organizations, and I view them as almost private companies that are run through the government, the business model that they put down for economic development, when you explain that to members of Congress, they get it. And it's because of the work you guys are doing, informing us, and I think you guys have come to our office multiple times, and I commend the work you do, because if you don't have the basics, water, electricity, refrigeration, it's hard to develop an economy. You can't have an agricultural economy that goes into trade and marketing to grow a business sector, and so you have to have those basic things. And when you look at a continent like Africa, and you have 650 million people without electricity in the 21st century, we can do better. And this is a way that I saw that it'll help the continent of Africa, it'll help people come up out of poverty to where they have sustainability of the basic needs of foods. And this is just a common sense approach. And in that process, you were talking about getting more bang and more accountability for the money we were spending. This is a way to do it. So it's a win-win situation. And it'll unlock, like you were saying, the potential that's been trapped in these situations and circumstances around the world that don't have these basic necessities. And it'll unlock that potential, and no telling where that human potential will lead us in the future.
Thank you for that. Mel, maybe you could talk a little bit about the work that NRECA does sending linemen, sending your real experts in a functioning power system in a community, and how they come back as evangelists, if you will, for the cause. I've had the opportunity to read on your blog some of their stories, and it's really quite remarkable. They leave their own communities, spend time in in different areas, whether it's in Africa or Guatemala or Haiti, whatnot, helping the local communities. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that work.
Well, in addition to my NRECA duties and my board, and people back home may disagree, but I actually try to run a co-op back in Arkansas when I'm there. But it truly is an amazing story to tell. Co-ops are, and I'm awful quick to point out, we don't ever, business models are business models, and the for-profit business model is great. We don't knock that at all. But when I get up every day, I get up and go to work for the person that's on the other side of the meter. That's who I work for. And the work that we do overseas in these countries is basically the same thing. We are working for the quality of life for those people. I was in Guatemala for the first time in 2012, and you talk about the linemen. I saw a group of Indiana linemen electrify a village for the first time, and I think it was maybe 60 or 70 homes, I don't remember. But when you see a big 250-pound lineman with tears rolling down his cheek, that you joke with in the back lot every day before he goes to work and didn't even know the guy could cry, and he's sitting there just crying like a baby, you know that person has been affected. Not only are we in these partnerships affecting the lives of those that get power, but our people are being affected by it as well. In 2012, I met a young lady named Esna, a young girl. I believe she was probably 10, and she came up to us and she said, it was really, truly, and I'm not exaggerating, it was heart-wrenching. She comes up, and she said, "Would you electrify our village next?" So I made it my goal to come back, and Arkansas's first project was her village, and it was the next year. And I had linemen down there for that. We had a dozen linemen from Arkansas. And here's the contrast. Beside Esna was her 92-year-old grandmother, who had lived her entire life with no electricity. And on that day, she saw her then 11-year-old granddaughter get electricity that she would have for the rest of her life. And there was not a dry eye among the linemen. In fact, they all came to me and they said, "We found Esna, we found her house, she just got power." So those are the stories that we tell. This is the good that we're doing overseas, and this is what, Congressman, I appreciate about what y'all are doing and what ONE is doing and all the other partnerships. We are truly together making a difference in this world.
Thank you. Those stories are so impactful, and we try to share those on the Hill as well. And I think it's great when we have either ONE volunteers or volunteers from other organizations or your linemen really talk about their firsthand experience. Jackie, maybe you could also comment on the work that ONE does with African governments, with community outreach to make sure that the policies that we're advocating for here in the U.S. Actually meet the needs and the desires of local communities. Obviously, we run into trouble when the U.S. tries to impose on communities unsustainable programs. So maybe you could talk about the advocacy work being done by ONE in Africa and the type of feedback that we've gotten on this effort.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to sort of recap for everybody, we have a membership of about 7 million people globally, and 2.5 of those are in the United States, but another 2 million and growing fast are on the continent of Africa. So it does give us a great channel to be able to hear from our members who are impacted by some of the things that we're pushing for in our governments. What do they need? Is it helping them? And getting that kind of feedback loop from them. And, I do think coming back to us coming across this issue and finding that it's so fundamental but it wasn't being discussed, a thing that we hear really often is just the prohibitive cost of any kind of power and how it impacts every aspect of life. Even if you are so fortunate to have a generator, you're paying 5 times as much at least just to power it, and only for a few hours a day, which makes it difficult to do any other thing in your life. And that's if you're just a regular citizen. That's if you're a mom and you want to be able to make food for your children, but you can't, so you have to build a wood fire to boil water before you can even begin making breakfast, to keeping the lights on after dark so that they can actually study for school. So those are sort of everyday citizen issues that we've heard about. But even at a bigger level, how do you run a hospital without energy? How do you, when we talk about maternal health, survivability and birth, if you have a complication and there's no lights, no blood because there's no refrigeration, how do you manage something like that without electricity? How do you run a business? How do you do any of these things? And so we got those messages from far and wide of the impact that energy has on every aspect of life, and that really spoke to us. And it's something that we continue to use, and we listen for those stories from our members wherever they're at, and we try to convey those back to governments in the region as well. I think that sort of the future of ONE will continue to be even more on the continent and messaging to their governments of what they need to see, and that accountability piece from the governments who are responsible. So.
And building off of accountability, not only holding our own government accountable and the administration accountable for the resources, that MCC and OPIC and State Department, USAID, others are dedicating to this effort, and holding African governments accountable as well to make sure that these projects are helping to meet every citizen, that the power is not just going to wealthier areas, but that we're getting power out to rural communities, and building that that economic growth that I think is so important, as the Congressman mentioned, to eliminating eventually, hopefully, the need for traditional assistance programs. We only have a couple of minutes left, and since we have the Congressman here, I wanted to ask what he sees for the committee coming up. HVAC has been it's been very productive. I know that comes as a huge shock. We talk about getting things done, but whether it's Electrify, the Foreign Aid Accountability and Transparency Act, the Global Food Security Act, I mean, the committee has really done a commendable job working with their center counterparts. And I just thought maybe we could ask you what you see coming up and how we can help support that.
Well, I appreciate you pointing that out. Ed Royce, the majority or the chairman of the committee, along with Elliot Engel, the ranking member, have done a phenomenal job of having a very bipartisan group. And when it comes to things on foreign affairs, we're pretty much in lockstep because the policies are so powerful around the globe and the things that they do. And I want to give a shout out to the National Rural Electric Co-ops because you did electrify America. You made a change in this country. And if we take that technology and the knowledge that you know and partner up with people like OPIC, which allows financing for countries or companies like you to go into countries that aren't the most stable, where outside resources want to invest in, it allows you to do what you do. And you bring power to the people. And by bringing power to the people, it empowers the people. And when you empower the people, it leads to better governance. It leads, and it's probably a better way to do our diplomacy instead of, going in there and telling people how to live. Help them how to live. Show them how to do those things. And by doing that, it's probably the best footprint that we can do as Americans to other countries of what we stand for. And I'm proud to be on the Foreign Affairs Committee. We have a lot of good things. The GFS, the Global Food Security Act, was another one of those ones that there was a lot of contention in there, but it's the right thing to do. It's a good way to help other countries. And you can't have world security if you don't have nutritional security. And so let's help bring these things in there, bring electricity in there. And by doing this, we're going to make small incremental changes, but it's a paradigm shift of how we've done foreign aid over the past, and this is what I'm excited about. And the one organization, you guys have done phenomenal work, and I look forward to keep working with you. So thank you for allowing me to be here.
Great, thank you. With that, I think we'll end this panel and move on to some of the other great speakers that we have today. But again, on behalf of the co-ops, the other sponsors of Global Oval, I really want to thank our panelists for being here. And I commend everybody to look at Power Africa has an app, actually, and we talk about accountability and transparency, and you actually can download this app and monitor and take a look at the projects that the U.S. government is investing in sub-Saharan Africa, and it's really a great tool, and I think it's amazing the administration actually put this together. But as we hold feet to the fire and make sure that the resources and this legislation is being implemented to its maximum potential, it's a way for people to watch that and to read about the projects, and whether it's a wind farm or a nat gas plant or all sorts of different kinds of investments from the U.S. in partnership with the private sector. It's a great tool and one that I hope everyone will check out. It's sort of the ultimate in transparency from the government, and I think Power Africa needs to do a little better job of telling everyone about it, but it's a neat tool, so I hope everyone can take a look at that. So with that, thank you.
Thank you.